Thank you, Margaret. It's beautiful, huh? It's amazing. So Margaret inspired our talk this morning from her first song. I was really caught by the phrase, "you get to." You get to. The truth is that we have the power to make our dreams come true, and we have the power to change circumstances not only personally but locally, not only personally but nationally and globally. And so, as Margaret sang in the opening song, nobody gets to dance for you, but you get to. Nobody gets to make your dreams come true, but you get to. It reminds me of being a child when I would get permission to go outside and play, or, we would get a dog or a guinea pig. It's like you get to pick out the rabbit. We had ducks too. Lived in the downtown Chicago more or less, but we had ducks and all kinds of weird things. And being from a parent's side of it, you know how excited your kids get when you say, "Guess what you get to do today?" It's like you get to do this thing. So I love that line about you get to dream. You get to do whatever it is that you wish to do on this life and in this planet. You get to do it. We have the permission of Spirit. And yet, if it's true that we get to, then why don't we? Huh? Sometimes, we know what our dreams are, but maybe we're not necessarily doing what we need to do to make the dreams happen. And why is that? Or there's so much stuff that's happening in the world right now that needs healing. Why don't we? Why don't we heal it? Einstein said that you can't solve a problem from the same consciousness that created it. And so what we're looking at today in our honor of Buddhism is about moving beyond our habits and our patterns and what we do, our samsaras, if you will, and stepping outside of that and getting a bigger picture of the patterns that we happen to live in our lives, because we get locked in by our habits. We get locked in by our patterns, and sometimes we don't even know what we're doing. So a story that I like is about an elephant. You know how an elephant is about 24,000 pounds and it's about 13 feet tall, and it can take its trunk and just rip off a branch. And yet, an elephant, when it is a baby, is trained to be confined, and a chain or a rope is tied around its foot, and then it's tied to a peg in the ground. And so when it tries to move, when it tries to run away, there's no place it can go, and the more it struggles, the more its leg hurts, so it learns to stay still. And when it grows into a large elephant that could easily just break that chain, just like that, the elephant is so conditioned from being a baby that it can't move, that it believes that it can't move. In what ways are we like that elephant, where we assume that things are a certain way, but they're not necessarily that way at all, but we have been chained to a limited belief, we've been chained to something, and so we don't question it, and we assume that we are stuck. So what is the chain that you need to break? What are your chains of limitation? Because the truth is, you get to dream. Nobody else can dream for you, but you get to. No one else can dance for you, but you get to. So when we look at this, it's really a thought that can keep us locked in. And in Buddhism, in Hinduism, in New Thought movement, the saying is that you sow a thought, yeah? And when you sow a thought, you reap an act. You sow an act, you reap a habit. You sow a habit and you reap a character. And you sow a character and you reap a destiny. And so everything begins back. If we want to make the changes, we need to go back to the original thought. I'm chained. The elephant is chained to the peg. Change that thought. So again, I think that we have patterns that we are unaware of, and perhaps they're patterns or belief systems that we come in from our biological families, our families of origin, or our culture, and we sometimes cannot see beyond what is. Another story I like is that of this mother and daughter who were baking an Easter ham, and her mom, the mom, cut off the ends of the ham. Some of you may know this story. You know, they cut off an inch on one side, an inch on the other. And the little girl says, "So Mom, why do we always cut an inch off of each side of the ham before we put it in the pan?" And she said, "I don't know. My mother did it. You know, I've always done it my whole life." She goes, "Let's call Grandma and ask her why." So they called up Grandma and they said, "We're making an Easter ham, and you know how you always cut off the inch from both sides? So we're doing that, and we realized that we really didn't know why. Does it make the ham cook better or taste better?" And she says, "Well, the truth is I don't really know, because my mother did it, and she always did it." Well, luckily, great-grandma was still alive, so they call her up, and they say, "Hey, Grandma, why do you cut an inch off the ham on both sides?" And she says, "Well, it's because when I first got married, I had a pan that was too small and the ham didn't fit in it. And the only way I could get the ham to fit into it was if I cut off an inch from each side, and I never got around to buying another pan, so I always cut the ends off the ham." Crazy, yeah? But how many things do we do like that? You know, where it's like, well, I don't know, it's just kind of how we always did it. It's just, and we get locked sometimes in these patterns, and we don't think about how to change them. So one of my questions to you this week is, how can you shake it up a little bit? You know, we've talked about our dreaming, and you know you got a good dream when it pushes you beyond your limitations, when it pushes you and makes you a little bit uneasy. You know, you're in new territory and you're not sure where you are. But, you know, we can shake up our habits and our patterns in little ways. Like, how many of us drive home the same way after church on Sunday, huh? You could go home a different way. Or you go home from work the same way all the time. You could ride your bike or take the bus or go a different route. It's a small thing, but it starts to shake up the patterns a little bit. Try a new food you've never tried before. I just signed up for 4 PCC cooking classes in Edmonds, you know, because I don't know how to make Thai food or Egyptian food, but, you know, it'll be fun. We had our board meeting Thursday night, and the board took me on a road trip, which was quite fun. We rode the ferry to Bremerton, and then we had dinner in Bremerton, and they was celebrating my birthday early, and we had our board meeting on the ferry, and it was so much fun. And granted, we had a light agenda, but you know, the ferry's kind of made for board meetings, because you got those long benches, and you can all fit and just sit there with all your stuff. And it was fun to have a board meeting on the ferry. We had our bylaw meeting Tuesday night, and Desi said, you know, let's call ourselves the Bylaw Blues Band. You know, it's like, okay, because you know, bylaws are pretty boring. You know, who wants to sit and spend an evening going over bylaws? Not me. So we, as she sent out an email, we each had to pick an instrument that we were. Not that we brought the instruments, nor do we know how to play them, but it was sort of like bringing in some character and some fun into the bylaw meeting. And I got to tell you, I won't exactly say it was fun, but it was the best bylaw meeting I've ever been to, and we rewrote the bylaws in 2.5 hours. I mean, that's pretty amazing. Thank you, Desi, for your leadership. Kathleen, one of our chaplains, has a way of bringing humor and wit and change to wherever she is. And at our chaplain retreat this year, she got Mike Brennan to dress up as a pregnant nun and pay a visit to us. She got me to dress up as Madonna and Christopher as a bodyguard. And I went in her room, and her room was filled with costumes for all of us for the weekend, for the chaplain retreat. So there was this element of, okay, this is the routine, and this is what we're doing, but let's shake it up a little, let's mix it up a little. I received a card from Joan Gregory, and she put a poem in there that's on the front of your bulletin, just the one line, by Mary Oliver. And Joan looked at me and she said, I just want you to see that last line of that poem, which is, tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? It's a great question for New Year's, and it's a great question for your birthday. But the truth is, it's a great question to be asked every single day, isn't it? Because sometimes I think, I love that Pink Floyd song, time for lying in the sunshine, staying home to watch the rain. You're young and life is long, and there's time to kill today. And then one day you find that 10 years have got behind you, and it's just like that. So what are you going to do with your one wild and precious life? So the truth is, we get into our habits and we resist change. But what's interesting to me is that once we change, we adapt to the change as if it were the norm. Louise said it. When she said it, she's surprised by how well we adapt to what is new. And if you think about it, think how we have adapted to life with computers. It's almost like life is unthinkable without a computer. Life seems to be unthinkable without a cell phone. When I was walking the Camino last summer, we're walking on these ancient roads, and everybody's got their backpack, and all on the Camino, people were yakking on their cell phones through the whole thing, yeah? Where were we before Google Maps and GPS? I spent a lot of time lost and driving around before those came in. So we have these changes that are always happening in our society, in our families, in our lives. And even though we've resisted those changes, boy, when they happen, it's like, yeah, why didn't I do this all the time? So I've asked you for stories from your personal life that we can share with the whole community. And Louise Carnahan has offered up a story this week.